You were never meant to see this much, not in a world that survives on illusions, not in a society that rewards the blind and punishes the awake. But here you are, cursed with clarity. You walk into rooms and sense what no one says. You sit in silence and hear what others are hiding. You look at smiles and feel the sorrow underneath them. And the deeper you see, the more you realize. You are not just different, you're in danger. Because clarity, it isolates. It ruins the game everyone else agreed to play. And when you refuse to wear the mask, they don't see insight. They see threat. You're not the mirror they asked for. You're the reflection they have spent their entire lives avoiding. So they label you too intense, too sensitive, too much. But what they really mean is you see too clearly, and that makes them uncomfortable. This is not a gift that fits neatly in spiritual Instagram quotes. This is a wound, a weight, a waking burden you never asked to carry. You were not taught how to manage it. There was no manual, no warning, just the slow realization that your perception, this unrelenting awareness, is slowly pulling you away from everyone else. You don't feel superior, you feel alone. You did not ask to see people's hidden sadness, their buried shame, their fake confidence. You just do. And it's exhausting. You used to think something was wrong with you, why you could not enjoy the surface like everyone else, why small talk felt like drowning, why your presence seemed to disturb the room without saying a word. But what if nothing's wrong with you at all? What if your suffering comes from seeing too much truth in a world built on denial? Carl Jung had a name for this. Not a diagnosis, not a disorder, but a danger. To see clearly is to see what others refuse to admit exists, and that makes you dangerous. He called it dangerous perception, the rare, terrifying ability to pierce through human masks and into the unconscious beneath them. And once you have it, you can't turn it off. You can't go back. You can't unsee what you have seen. So the real question is not, why do I feel this way? The real question is, what is this perception doing to me, to my relationships, to my soul, to my identity? Because the truth is, you are not broken, but you are burdened, and this burden changes everything. In the next few minutes, you will discover why your ability to see too clearly, to read between smiles, to feel under silence, to absorb what others hide, is not a personality trait. It's a warning, a mirror, a transformation. And once you understand the hidden danger of seeing too clearly, you will never look at yourself or the world the same way again. Are you ready? Because this journey is not about finding comfort. It's about finding the courage to finally understand who you really are and why you were never meant to fit. And in you have felt it, that cold shift in the air when you speak a little too honestly, that tension when you ask the question no one else will, the way people's smiles fade, not because you were cruel, but because you were clear. You did not say anything wrong. You did not cross a line. You simply saw too much. And that alone was enough to turn them against you. But why? Why is it that the clearer your vision becomes, the more people begin to distance themselves, even attack you? Carl Jung had the answer. He called it shadow projection, the psychological process where people cast the parts of themselves they refuse to acknowledge onto someone else. And if you are the one who sees clearly, you become their favorite screen. They can't face their own envy, so they accuse you of arrogance. They can't admit their own emptiness, so they call you hollow. They can't accept their buried rage, so they claim you are the one who's unstable. You become the reflection they never asked to see, and they will do anything to shatter the mirror. It's not that you are too much, it's that you are too revealing. You walk into a room, and without saying a word, people feel exposed. Because your presence does not play by the rules of surface-level living, your eyes cut through pretense like a blade, and instead of asking themselves, why do I feel threatened by this person? They take the easier route. Something is wrong with them, so they call you names. Too intense, overthinker, cold, overly sensitive, paranoid, dark. It's emotional gaslighting dressed as concern. They will suggest you lighten up, that you take things too seriously, that you always find something negative. But what they are really saying is, you are seeing what I have tried to bury, and I hate you for it. This is not paranoia, it's pattern. It happens with friends, at work, even in families, especially in families. You were probably the one who noticed when things felt fake, when someone's smile did not match their energy, when the words did not align with the undercurrent of resentment, and when you pointed it out gently, maybe even lovingly, you were not met with understanding. You were met with resistance. Because truth, when spoken out loud, threatens the delicate balance people spend their whole lives protecting. Jung warned us, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And if you are someone who reflects that soul back to them, they'll make you the enemy. So what do? You start shrinking. You start softening your edges. You start pretending you don't see what you see. You tell yourself, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I am too much. Maybe I should just be quiet. But silence doesn't protect you, it erases you. Because deep down, you know, you were not made to play this game. You were not built to pretend the mask is real. You were built to see through it, and that clarity, it comes with a price. People will turn on you, not because you're cruel, not because you're dangerous, but because you're honest in a world that survives on lies. And yet, here's the twist, they need you, even when they reject you, because only those who can see clearly can heal what others deny. But before you can help anyone, you must first understand the true cost of this vision, not just in social rejection, but in the way it leaves you starving for something deeper. And that leads us into the next revelation, a pain you've likely carried your entire life. You can't survive on the surface. You crave something more, something that shallow conversations, fake friendships, and emotional fast food will never satisfy. Let's talk about that next. There's a moment in almost every conversation where your body feels it before your mind does, that subtle drop in energy, that tightening in your chest, that silent voice that says, this isn't real. Someone is smiling, but it doesn't reach their eyes. Someone is talking, but every word feels rehearsed. It's like you're surrounded by actors, and everyone else seems content to play along, but you're the only one who sees the script, and that's where the pain begins. Because once you see the mask, you can't unsee it. The fake enthusiasm, the socially approved phrases, the endless loops of small talk that say everything and mean nothing. You nod, you smile, but inside, you're dying. Shallow conversation doesn't just bore you, it feels like starvation. Your soul doesn't want noise, it wants truth. Not, how was your day? But, why are we pretending everything's okay when it's clearly not? Not, weather's been weird lately, but, what do you believe happens after we die? You crave words that bleed, questions that crack open the mask, moments that touch the places we're all trying to hide. But the world doesn't run on that kind of honesty. It runs on performance. And the deeper you go, the more isolated you become. Jung saw this clearly. He wrote that certain personality types, depth types, live in constant existential tension, too awake to belong, too human to detach, trapped between what is real and what is socially acceptable. You see the lies society tells itself, that status equals success, that appearances equal happiness, that endless distraction equals fulfillment, and everyone else seems so comfortable in this delusion. They laugh, they drink, they post selfies, they repeat the script, but you're Cassandra in a crowded city, gifted with vision, cursed to never be believed. In Greek myth, Cassandra was blessed with the ability to see the future, but cursed so that no one would ever believe her. She screamed warnings that went unheard. She wept over truths no one wanted to face. You don't need to predict the future to understand her pain. You live it. You see behind the eyes. You hear the truth hiding in someone's tone. You know when someone's spirit is breaking, even if their Instagram says otherwise. And that's the burden. To carry clarity in a world that rewards performance. Most people want mirrors that flatter. You offer mirrors that reveal. And that's not welcomed. It's feared. So, you play along, for a while. You smile. You ask the safe questions. You talk about TV shows and traffic and weather. But every moment of that performance feels like betrayal. Not just of others, but of yourself. Because deep down, you know, this isn't who you are. You weren't made for shallow. You weren't built for surface. You were born to see beneath. And that kind of sight doesn't come without a cost. Jung called it a dangerous clarity. Not because the truth is inherently harmful, but because truth pierces illusions. And illusions are what hold most of society together. You can't keep pretending. You've tried. But the emptiness always returns. Not because you're flawed, but because you're tuned for depth in a world addicted to distraction. This isn't arrogance. This isn't elitism. This is your nervous system rejecting the lie, and that rejection isolates you, because the more clearly you see, the harder it becomes to connect, until you find yourself surrounded by people, and yet lonelier than you've ever been. But the problem isn't just that you see through others. It's that you often absorb what they're hiding, the anxiety behind their laughter, the grief beneath their silence, the chaos under their calm. You don't just read it, you carry it. And that leads us to something even heavier, something that doesn't just isolate you emotionally, but drains you energetically. Let's talk about the next layer of the curse, the absorption. There's a specific kind of exhaustion you've felt, but never fully explained. It's not just being tired after socializing. It's deeper, heavier, like something inside you was drained, and you don't even know what was taken, because you didn't just listen to others, you felt them. Every hidden emotion, every suppressed memory, every unshed tear that no one else noticed, your body did. And long after the conversation ends, you're still carrying what they never said. This is the absorption curse, a phenomenon Jung called participation mystique, where the boundaries between you and the other begin to dissolve. You don't just witness their energy, you merge with it. You become the container for their chaos. The rage they swallowed now burns in your chest. The grief they buried echoes in your stomach. The confusion they suppressed buzzes in your nervous system like static. You walk away from others, and suddenly you're anxious or angry or broken. But it's not even yours. You're carrying their unconscious, and it's tearing you apart. Most people don't live like this. They move through life in a kind of numbness, detached, compartmentalized, but not you. Your empathy isn't a choice. It's a radar, a sponge, a curse. And what makes it worse is how invisible it is. No one sees what it costs you to be the strong one. No one notices that your stillness is holding back a storm, not your own, but everyone else's. You've probably been called a healer, a safe space, someone people open up to instantly. And you wear that role well, but beneath it, you're drowning. Because every time you help them carry their weight, you add another brick to your own invisible load. And eventually, you can't remember who you are without the burden. This is where shadow addiction begins. You get so used to fixing, absorbing, holding others, that you forget to check in with yourself. You avoid your own pain by tending to everyone else's. You become the therapist who never cries, the friend who always listens but rarely speaks, the one who knows everyone's story, except your own. Carl Jung warned us of this. He spoke of the wounded healer, those who help others not from wholeness, but from their own unhealed pain. And if you're not careful, you'll build your entire identity around being needed, not loved, not seen, just useful. But usefulness is not connection. It's not intimacy. It's not love. It's performance. And the more you perform, the more fragmented you become. Because while you're holding space for others, you're abandoning yourself. And eventually, you wake up with a haunting realization. You know everyone else's soul, but your own has become a stranger. This is the silent collapse no one talks about. The energetic implosion behind burnout. The identity erosion behind fatigue. The spiritual crisis behind anxiety. It's not a mental health issue. It's a boundary collapse, a psychic breach. You were never meant to carry this much. Yes, your sensitivity is powerful, but it was never meant to be weaponized against your own well-being. And if you don't reclaim your inner space, you'll spend your life as a container for other people's chaos, never knowing what peace actually feels like. So, what's the answer? Solitude, not as escape, but as return. You need silence to hear yourself again. You need space to distinguish your pain from theirs. You need stillness, so you can finally feel what you feel. Because your soul isn't a storage unit, it's a temple, and it's time to clear out the echoes that don't belong to you. But this doesn't happen just once. This is a war you fight every day, between being the healer the world wants, and the human you've forgotten to be. And that brings us to the next wound. Endurance. Quieter one that doesn't scream, but splits. Let's talk about the price of fragmentation, and the pieces of you that are slowly dying to be whole again. You don't remember exactly when it started. You only know that somewhere along the way, you split. There was who you really were, and then there was who the world needed you to be, and the gap between the two kept growing. So, you adapted. You adjusted your voice to fit the room. You softened your truth to protect their comfort. You wore the mask, again and again, until it began to feel like skin. At work, you became the efficient version of yourself. At home, the agreeable one. With friends, the entertaining one. With strangers, the quiet observer. Each role carefully curated. Each layer slowly separating you from the only thing that ever truly mattered. Yourself. Carl Jung warned us of this. He called it the danger of over-identifying with the persona, the mask we wear to function in society. And he said that when we adapt too well to the outer world, we risk losing the inner one entirely. At first it worked. People liked you more. You fit in better. The discomfort faded for a while. But over time, something inside you began to fracture. Because adaptation isn't always growth. Sometimes, it's self-abandonment in disguise. And the more you wore the mask, the more your true self began to revolt. It showed up in small ways. That strange heaviness when you laugh at a joke you don't find funny. The headache after a conversation you faked your way through. The fatigue that no amount of sleep can cure. These weren't just moods, they were protests. Your soul, refusing to keep playing a role it never auditioned for. You began to see yourself the way a mirror sees a mask. Fragile, temporary, not quite real. And then one day, the mirror cracked. Maybe you said something honest, and the room went silent. Maybe you stopped performing, and someone walked away. Maybe you couldn't fake it anymore, and everything you built on that performance began to collapse. That wasn't failure. That was the awakening. Because beneath every cracked mask is a face that's been begging to breathe. But unmasking isn't glamorous. It's terrifying, because if you remove the persona, what's left? What if people leave? What if no one accepts the real you? What if they were only ever drawn to the character, and yet the real tragedy is staying split, performing normal while your soul screams for truth, smiling on the outside while dying on the inside? It's a slow spiritual death, and the body keeps the score. Anxiety becomes chronic. Fatigue becomes your baseline. Depression becomes the echo of a self you keep burying to survive. But here's what Jung taught us. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not the version they applaud, not the one that keeps you safe, but the one that can finally breathe without shrinking. And yes, there's a cost. The masks gave you protection. They got you approval, belonging, control. But they also silenced your purpose. Because as long as you're split, as long as you're playing roles, you can't fulfill the role only you were born to play. And deep down, you know this isn't sustainable. You can feel it, like the walls of a stage set trembling under the weight of your truth. You weren't meant to live in costume. You were meant to live in clarity. And clarity begins the moment you let go of the performance and choose to be whole, even if it costs you the crowd. Because only then will you emit the frequency that calls your real life toward you. And that frequency, it's how others like you will finally find you. In the next section, we'll step into something mystical, the way rare souls recognize each other, even through silence. You have felt it, maybe once, maybe twice in your life. That moment when someone looks at you and for the first time they actually see you. Not the mask, not the version you've carefully calibrated, but you, raw, complex, intense, unfiltered. And somehow, they don't flinch, they don't look away, they don't shrink, they recognize you. And in that moment, time does something strange. It slows down, it bends, it rearranges itself into a single silent phrase. There you are. I've been looking for you. Carl Jung called this synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence so precise, so personal, it breaks the illusion of randomness. Because deep down, you know you didn't just meet this person. You were pulled into alignment by something older than memory, something larger than logic. It's not about shared interests. It's not about compatibility charts or personality tests. It's about resonance, a frequency match, Your soul recognizes theirs like a tuning fork finds harmony. You feel safe, not because they promise protection, but because their energy doesn't require translation. You speak in half sentences, and they already understand. You reveal a part of yourself you've never shared before, and they nod, not in surprise, but in relief, because they've been carrying the same truths in silence. These encounters are rare, so rare, you might only experience one or two in your entire life. But when they happen, they validate everything. All the years you felt misunderstood, all the times you thought something was wrong with you, all the nights you spent wondering if your intensity was too much. They vanish, replaced by one quiet realization. You're not broken, you're just tuned differently. And now, finally, you've met someone who hears the same signal. This is the awakening frequency, the psychic vibration of souls who refuse to dim their light. It's why the connection feels ancient, why the conversation feels like a remembering, why there's no performance, no persona, no pretense, just depth, just resonance, just truth. And once you've tasted it, once you've been seen without shrinking, everything else becomes unbearable. You can't go back to shallow. You can't return to pretending. You'd rather walk alone than dim your frequency again, because you've now felt what it's like to be mirrored instead of managed. And the illusion of being too much has shattered into a deeper truth. You were never too much. They were just never tuned to your signal. But here's the paradox. The more aligned you become, the more disconnected you feel from everything else. You stop craving attention and start craving recognition. You stop seeking validation and start seeking vibration. And suddenly, loneliness isn't about being alone anymore. It's about being surrounded by people who can't hear your frequency. But don't let that break you, because now you know what you're looking for. Now you know what's possible. And the signal you're sending out, it's being received by someone else, somewhere, right now. But before you can fully transmit that signal, before you can step into the life waiting for the real you, there's one more shift that must happen. You must stop hiding your truth and start living your purpose. Let's talk about what that means next. There's a moment after you've been misunderstood, rejected, drained, where the silence becomes deafening. You've seen too much, felt too deeply, lost too many pieces of yourself in rooms that couldn't hold your truth. And still, you remain, but not because you're weak, not because you're broken. You're still here because something inside you refuses to disappear. Something deeper than emotion, older than memory, a purpose. Carl Jung believed that those who walk the path of individuation, those who integrate the shadow, awaken the true self, and step out of collective illusion, carry a specific burden. They don't just awaken for themselves, they awaken for the collective. Because once you see clearly, you're no longer just a participant in the world's patterns. You become a mirror, a disruptor, a guide, and the world doesn't always want to be guided. It wants to stay asleep, because sleep feels safe, dreams feel comforting, masks feel easier than mirrors. So when someone like you appears, someone who speaks the unspeakable, questions the unquestioned, feels what no one else dares to feel, the world reacts with resistance. It shames you, silences you, tries to mold you back into something easier to digest. And yet, no matter how hard you try to conform, you can't. Not because you're stubborn, but because you were never meant to disappear into the background. You were born with a frequency that disturbs comfort. You carry a truth that doesn't fit into polite conversation. You hold a vision that refuses to shrink into normal. And that's why, even when you succeed, you still feel empty. You get the job, but your soul feels numb. You make the money, but something inside whispers, this isn't it. You play the role, but your spirit never claps for the performance. Because you weren't built for applause. You were built for transformation. And transformation requires sacrifice. It requires standing in rooms where no one agrees, and speaking anyway. It requires being misunderstood, again and again, and not shrinking. It requires carrying the vision, even when it costs you belonging. That's why your sensitivity isn't random. It's a signal, a compass. It points toward what's broken in the world, not so you can wallow in it, but so you can change it. Your clarity isn't for decoration, it's for illumination. But here's the danger. If you don't claim this calling, you'll spend your life haunted by a truth you never lived. You'll feel the emptiness grow, not because you have nothing, but because you abandoned the one thing that made you you. You weren't sent here to be liked. You were sent here to disrupt, to challenge, to awaken. And that means there will be resistance. There will be loss. There will be days when you wish you could unsee, undo, forget. But there will also be power, alignment, moments of unspeakable clarity, people whose lives shift because you had the courage to live yours fully. This is your dangerous calling, to use your sight not just to survive, but to lead. But before you can rise into that role, you must return to the place where it all began, the wound, the break, the fracture that made you question your worth, and ultimately revealed your greatest power. There's a wound you've carried for as long as you can remember. It doesn't bleed, it doesn't scar, but it shaped everything. The loneliness, the self-doubt, the feeling that no matter how hard you tried, you were never quite right. Too sensitive, too intense, too awake in a world that rewards sleepwalkers. But what if this wound, the very thing that made you feel broken, was never a flaw? What if it was the mark of your mission? Carl Jung believed it was. He called it the sacred wound, a deep psychic rupture that doesn't just hurt, but initiates. Because some people awaken through inspiration, but people like you awaken through fracture. It was the heartbreak that opened your eyes, the betrayal that taught you to see behind the smile, the rejection that made you question everything, and then start remembering who you really are. You became a cracked vessel, not because you were weak, but because you were chosen to carry light where others only saw shadow. And in that cracking, you became transparent to truth. You saw what others denied. You felt what others avoided. You spoke what others silenced. And yes, it cost you. But that cost was not in vain, because what isolated you is what now makes you needed. What hurt you is what now makes you healing. What broke you is what now makes you brilliant. This is the paradox. Your gift was hidden inside your wound the whole time. Just like the phoenix that rises not despite the fire, but because of it. You were never destroyed. You were reforged. And now, you've returned. Not to who you used to be, but to who you were always meant to become. This is what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who the world expects, not who survival shaped, but who the fire couldn't destroy." So now I'll ask you one final time. Are you ready? Not to pretend, not to shrink, not to wear the mask a moment longer, but to step forward as you truly are, unmasked, unapologetic, unmistakably real. Because this isn't the end of your journey. This is the unveiling. You've seen the truth, felt the weight, survived the break. Now it's time to live the integration, to speak, to rise, to lead, not for the world's approval, but for your own liberation. And if you've made it this far, if these words felt like home, then know this. You're not alone. You never were. There are others like you, tuned to the same frequency, healing through the same wound, rising from the same fire. We're here. And this is your invitation to join us. Drop a comment below. Just 3 words. I am ready. Let that be your declaration. Let that be your beginning. Let that be the frequency that draws your real tribe to you. Because in a world addicted to the superficial, your depth is not just rebellion, it's medicine. And we need you, fully seen, fully felt, fully awakened. So, welcome home. Welcome back to your clarity. Welcome to your real life. Now, rise.